Thank you for coming. So I'm really proud that Hernan and his team have decided to do this. It's kind of amazing. There's some legal obstacles. We don't really have the rights to do it all yet, but hopefully it'll get taken care of. But at any rate, I just want to say something about the origin of the book. I came to Stanford from New York City in 1962, which is, I know most of you weren't born yet, but that's when I was first a professor at Stanford. And I came out of New York City with a very traditional engineering background, and I was not interested in anything but designing machines and things like that. And then I got involved in what was called the human potential movement, which was starting in California, and there was a place called Esalen, which is not far from Stanford on Big Sur, and I got involved with people there. And I realized there was a lot more to life than just what I had learned so far. And I started to take more responsibility with my students rather than just give them a grade and course, but I started to be really concerned with their lives. And I saw two things that bothered me a lot. Most of them, in those days, let me just start, those days Silicon Valley was very different. There was no venture capital money and anything like that. And a lot of them said they wanted to start a company, but instead they graduated and they went to work for Hewlett-Packard or one of these big companies. And over the years, they kept talking about starting a company, but they never did it. So I realized that they didn't have what I called the habit of doing what they really wanted to. The other thing is they had problems in their lives. A lot of them came to me with issues, all sorts of personal issues. And they seemed to not be willing to get rid of them. And so those two ideas bothered me a lot. So I started a class where you did a project, you picked your own project, and it had to be either something you've always wanted to do in your life and never done, or get rid of a problem in your life. And it was their project. We made a contract in the beginning of the class, and the last day they presented the project to all the students. And that turned out to be very successful. And over the years, students have come to me and told me that was the best class they've ever had in Stanford or anywhere else, and it changed their life and many things like that. So I felt really inspired about that, and I brought more and more of that into my teaching. And this book is sort of based loosely on that idea. And one of the main things I found is that everybody has problems in their life. And we're not talking about problems like global problems. Most people lose sleep over very petty problems. And it's very interesting because most people in this room and most of the people I deal with are very smart people. And it bothered me, how come very smart people can't solve what seem like simple problems? And then I found in my research, when I would be advising a PhD student, we would work maybe a year or two, and it's an area I was totally familiar with. I did the research. I was one of the founders of robotics in the world. Nobody could know much more about it than I could. And yet we didn't have the right problem. And then when we found the right problem, it was 6 months and they were gone. So I got to realize that most of the time people don't solve problems because they're not working on the right problem. And I developed a method which is very simple to get the right problem. So the book talks about that idea. And it's a very simple notion. And it's basically, you ask yourself, what it would do for you if you solve the problem? We can talk more about it if you're interested. But it turns out that's a magic thing. And I have done it with thousands of people around the world. And I cannot tell you how it works all the time. And it works in my own life. So they're really simple ideas. The other idea which my book talks about is the idea that we pretend to be rational people. We attempt to be reasonable people. So if Hernan asks me why I came here, I would say, because you invited me. That's a rational, reasonable thing. But that's not why I came here. And the truth is, I don't know why I came here. The truth is, he invited me, and the truth is, I accepted, and I'm here. But how I got here is very complicated. It has to do with a million things. And everything in your life is that way. You think you know what your behavior is about. People have done tests, actually, put people into MRI machines and have them push a button and have them tell them why they made the choice of pushing. And it turns out the parts of your brain that fires to push the button fires before the part that makes up the reason. So what it is, most of our behavior is habitual. We're creatures of habit. We don't think about things, we just do things. We'd be dead if we have to think about everything we do. So when I came up to this stage, I didn't fall down, or I got here amazingly fine. I did it because I have the habit of climbing stairs, I know how to do it. But the whole thing is, if you asked me how I got up, I would explain it to you. But that's just to be reasonable. And my favorite example, if I go over to my friend here and I punch him in the nose and he says, "Why did you do that?" I say, "I don't know. Bernie is not a reasonable guy." But if I say, "You remind me of that guy when I was in the 3rd grade who used to bully me," I'm reasonable. I have a good reason. So we need a good reason for everything in life. But it turns out, most of the time, they're excuses. I mean, it doesn't matter. Who cares if you use reasons or not? Who cares why I came here? Who cares why you may care why I punched you, but most people don't care, okay? But the point simply is, excuses are bad things. No one wants to have an excuse. So we use reasons. And it turns out that many times you don't do what you want to do because you give yourself a reason. And I have a chapter titled "Reasons Are Bullshit." And it's as simple as that. If you do not use reasons for your behavior, just say what you've done, say what you've not done, you'll have a much better life. And if you use reasons, you will never change. So, and the way I found that out, I was in the board of directors of a company up in Berkeley, actually. And I used to come to the board meeting late every time. There'd be every few months, there'd be a board meeting. I'd always come late, and I'd tell them, "Oh, I'm really sorry, the traffic on the highway was very heavy." And Highway 17, those days. And it was heavy. It was heavy. And what it is I left my office too late. It's clear. I made an extra phone call. This was before cell phones. I made an extra phone call. I had a teletype in my office. I met a colleague on the way. And by the time I left Palo Alto, if there was just enough time, if there was no traffic all the way from Palo Alto to Berkeley, I would have been on time. But of course there was traffic, and I was always late. And when I realized that, I realized I should either stop going to the board, resign from the board, or give it enough respect to be there on time. And that changed my life from someone that was always late to someone who is always on time. I say I'm the pain in the ass who makes everyone around me very nervous because I start everything on time. And at Stanford, nobody starts anything on time. Okay? But it's an example of how my behavior changed almost overnight because I was willing to tell myself the truth and stop giving bullshit excuses. And that's what happens to most of us in life. If we don't do things that we want to do, it's because we're lying to ourselves and we let ourselves off with excuses. So there's a chapter in that. I'll say one third thing, and then you have to buy the book if you want to know the rest. The third thing that's really important, I don't know if you see Star Wars. You people see the Star Wars movie and Yoda says there's no try, there's just do. That's wrong. Every time I said I'm afraid I'm going to die right here, but if I live, the point simply, there is a try and there is a do. And it's okay to try and it's okay to do. What the problem is, we confuse the two. And we confuse the two because if you're trying to do something, it might happen, it might not happen. It's okay. It's okay. And it could be fun if it doesn't happen. Not everything has to happen in your life. But if you're doing something and you encounter an obstacle, you are not defeated. You walk around the obstacle. You found the way around the obstacle. And if you're trying, you don't necessarily find the way around the obstacle. So you have to know which state you're in. You have to know which state you're in. There's this guy here. You've probably never heard of him, Paul Hagen. He was a very interesting fellow. I met him when I first came to Stanford. He was a swimmer. He wanted to go to the Olympics. And he had an accident in the shower, and he had to have a back surgery, and the doctor told him he'd never swim again. And in spite of that, he got someone to train him in a reservoir. He qualified the last minute. He got to the Olympics. Not only did he win a gold medal, he set a world record. And he came back and put the medal on the doctor's desk. And he's a serial inventor. I bring him down to lecture at the Stanford all because he's inspirational. And he told me he has maybe 20 fantastic things that he started companies. He says, every time I've done something fantastic in my life, it's because I was blocked. I was blocked. I couldn't find a way around it. And I just somehow eventually found it, and I got creative. So it's okay to be blocked, but it's not okay to give up. And that's the difference between trying to do something and doing something. So those are the kinds of things I talk about in my book. And it's lots of stories from my life. And I'm really glad I wrote it, I must say. And the other thing which surprised me, I get an email. It's almost a year now. And I get an email about once a day, sometimes from someone I know. You know, I was your student 20 years ago, and I loved the class. But I get it from people I don't know around the world. And I get it from colonels in the Army. I get it from teenagers. I get it from retired people. I get it from people starting companies. And it's always, you know, I had this problem for 2 years or 3, I had this problem, and by chapter 3 it was gone. Thank you for writing the book. So I feel really good about it, that these ideas, I've tried them all. Everything in the book, every idea I've tried in class for many, many years. And they really work. And I'm embarrassed to have written what's called a self-help book, because I find that kind of not a thing I would want to do normally. But I just felt so important about these things, and they're so simple ideas, they're so useful. And it brought me back to the beginning. When these students had problems, they could get rid of them. Why are they going to live their whole life hating their brother? Why are they going to live their whole life with a bad feeling toward their father? Why are they going to live their whole life with anything? You can get rid of all that. It's so easy. So anyway, that's what I did, and here we are. And so far, it's actually been translated into 13 real languages, and we hope Spanish will be the 14th language. So thank you for coming, and I hope you have a great life.